My name is Isabella Warren, and I am 33 years old. That Christmas Eve in Newport, Rhode Island, the air was cold enough to sting my cheeks as I carried armfuls of carefully wrapped gifts up the icy steps of my parents' colonial estate. Each ribbon had been tied with intention, each present chosen with the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. I pictured the fireplace crackling, my father humming along to carols, and my mother finally embracing me with warmth instead of distance. I imagined my sister Cassandra setting aside her pride long enough for us to laugh the way we did as children. That image glowed inside me, brighter than the light strung across the estate's stone pillars. But the moment I reached the heavy oak door, reality shattered the illusion. My mother, Eleanor, stood blocking the threshold. She wasn't dressed for the cold. Her silk blouse peeked out from beneath a thin cardigan, but her stare was colder than the December night. "Isabella," she said flatly, "you're not welcome this year." The words didn't make sense at first. I blinked, my arms trembling under the weight of the gifts, searching her face for some sign she was joking. Behind her, the golden light of the dining room glowed, silhouettes of relatives moving about with wine glasses in hand. Laughter drifted out like music I wasn't allowed to hear. Then Cassandra appeared. She slid gracefully past my mother's shoulder, draped in a crimson velvet dress, a smirk curling her lips. "Oh, look who thought she belonged here," she sneered. "This isn't a place for losers." Her words sliced through me with surgical precision, sharper than the icy wind. My breath caught. All those nights I had stayed late at the office, all the vacations I had skipped, all the overtime I had worked. Most of it had gone to Cassandra. $75,000 over the past 3 years. Drained from my savings to keep her boutique alive. I thought of every check I'd written, every reassuring promise she had made, every time she swore she would pay me back when her business turned the corner. And now she stood in the doorway of our family home, shoving me out into the cold like an unwanted guest. The gifts in my arms suddenly felt absurd. I forced a smile, the kind of brittle smile people wear when their soul is cracking. "Merry Christmas," I whispered, setting the boxes gently on the snow-dusted porch. My mother didn't move. Cassandra's smirk deepened. I turned on my heel and walked back down the stone steps, each footfall echoing in the silence. Inside my car, the warmth of the heater barely touched the frost that had settled into my bones. My hands shook, not from cold, but from humiliation and something darker, clarity. Cassandra believed she could mock me, discard me, and still rely on me as her invisible benefactor. She thought I would keep writing checks no matter how deeply she cut me. I unlocked my phone with steady fingers. My financial advisor's number lit up the screen. For once, my voice didn't tremble. "Cancel everything right now," I said, staring at the mansion's glowing windows. Silence followed, then a quiet confirmation on the other end. The line went dead. I leaned back in the seat, my chest tight, my pulse racing. Snowflakes drifted against the windshield, dissolving into tiny rivers. I imagined Cassandra's laughter fading when she discovered her boutique no longer had my lifeline. I imagined the shock in her eyes when the safety net she'd mocked as crumbs disappeared beneath her feet. For the first time in years, I wasn't the desperate middle child begging for a place at the table. I was something else entirely, a woman drawing her line in the sand. The memory of that night haunted me long after I left the estate. But it wasn't only the doorway rejection that burned, it was what happened inside, in the moments before I made that final call. I hadn't been invited to the Christmas dinner, but desperation outweighed pride. I still wanted answers. Why would my own mother ban me after everything I had done for this family? The estate's oak doors were heavy, but the anger in my chest was heavier. I pushed my way past them, heels clicking against polished wood floors as the chandelier's glare nearly blinded me. The dining room stretched before me like a stage. Crystal goblets sparkled, Plates gleamed untouched, and silverware lay perfectly aligned on linen that had never seen a wrinkle. Cassandra stood near the fireplace, her velvet dress catching the light as if she were born to be admired. She laughed too loudly, clutching a glass of Merlot while our cousins leaned in with practiced admiration. My parents sat rigid at the long table, the flicker of candlelight dancing across their faces, their silence a wall stronger than any lock. My voice broke that silence. "Why wasn't I invited?" I demanded, sharper than I intended. But I couldn't stop. The words ripped out of me after years of being ignored. Cassandra turned slowly, her smirk spreading. "Oh, you're here," she said, drawing out each syllable like venom. "Didn't expect you to show up after Mum told you to stay away." Her tone was smug, as if she'd already won some unspoken game. My gaze shot to my mother. Eleanor's hands fussed with her napkin, folding and refolding it with mechanical precision. My father cleared his throat, but his eyes never lifted from the tablecloth. Not one word in my defense. Not one. "I've been helping you for years, Cassandra," I snapped, my voice trembling with restrained fury. $75,000. 75. To keep your boutique from collapsing. And this is how you thank me? Cassandra rolled her eyes, leaning back against the fireplace as though she were too regal to stand straight. "Helping?" she scoffed. "You call those scraps helping? Your little handouts barely kept my business afloat. Real support means real money, Isabella. Something you wouldn't understand, crunching numbers all day in your boring job." Her words hit me harder than any slap. Scraps. My overtime, my skipped vacations, my drained savings, all dismissed as crumbs. My stomach turned and my hands trembled. But not with weakness, with clarity. I looked at my parents again. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing. My father shifted in his chair, jaw tight, but he didn't move. Their silence burned deeper than Cassandra's cruelty. It told me the truth. In their eyes, Cassandra could do no wrong. I laughed, but it was a brittle, humorless sound. "You think I'm your ATM?" I said, my voice low and steady. "You think I'll keep funding your failures while you stand here and humiliate me?" Cassandra's smirk only widened. "If you really cared, you'd invest properly. But I guess jealousy makes you cheap." That was it, the final crack in the dam. I pulled out my phone, scrolling until my advisor's number glowed on the screen. My heart pounded, but my fingers were steady. "You know what?" I said, locking eyes with her. "I'm done." I pressed call. The room hushed, all eyes on me. When the line connected, I didn't hesitate. "That 75,000 investment for my sister's boutique. Cancel it. Every cent. Right now." The silence in the room turned suffocating. Cassandra's smirk faltered, her wine glass trembling slightly in her grip. "What are you doing?" she snapped, stepping forward. I held up my hand, cutting her off. "You heard me." My advisor's calm voice confirmed the cancellation. I ended the call with a single tap. Cassandra's face drained of colour, her arrogance cracking into panic. "You can't do that. You'll ruin me." "You ruined yourself," I said coldly. From the corner of my eye, I caught her husband whispering something harsh into her ear. She flinched, eyes darting with sudden fear. For a flicker of a moment, I knew. He carried a secret, one she didn't want revealed. I didn't wait for her next outburst. My steps echoed as I walked toward the door, her voice chasing me, sharp and shrill. "You'll regret this, Isabella." But I didn't look back. I thought the humiliation would fade after that night, but Cassandra wasn't finished with me. Barely an hour after I drove away from the mansion, my phone buzzed with notifications. Against my better judgment, I opened Facebook. There it was, a post from Cassandra, public for the world to see. Some people pretend to be family, but won't lift a finger when it matters. Pathetic. My name was tagged, bolded, undeniable. Comments poured in like acid. Cousins, her so-called friends, even strangers siding with her. "What kind of sister does that?" one read. Another sneered, "No wonder she's alone." Each line cut deeper than the last. After all my sacrifices, after every dollar I funneled into her boutique, she painted me as the villain. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. I shut it off. I couldn't watch my reputation being shredded in real time. But her voice lingered, smug and cruel, echoing in my head. 2 days later, just when I thought the storm might pass, I received a text from an unfamiliar number. "We need to talk. It's about Cassandra." It was from her husband, Daniel. Curiosity warred with exhaustion, but the urgency in his words gnawed at me. We arranged to meet at a small diner on the edge of town, the kind of place where chipped red booths and greasy menus offered anonymity. Daniel looked like a man unraveling. His eyes were sunken, his tie crooked, and his hands fidgeted against a mug of untouched coffee. "Thanks for coming," he muttered, his voice low. "I can't keep covering for her anymore." I leaned forward, my stomach coiled tight. "Covering what, Daniel?" He slid his phone across the table. On the screen was a bank statement tied to Cassandra's boutique account. My name appeared in several deposits, money I had wired in good faith, but the expenses told a different story. Designer handbags, 5-star hotels, a $10,000 Paris trip, a Caribbean cruise, not one payment to fabric suppliers, seamstresses, or even rent. My chest tightened, fury burning through my veins. So all those nights I skipped vacations, all the overtime I worked, I whispered, it was never about the boutique. Daniel's expression was a mixture of shame and desperation. I tried to stop her. I told her she was pushing too far, but she doesn't listen. And now the kids... His voice cracked, his composure fracturing. I'm worried about them. About what happens when the money finally dries up. I wanted to scream, to shatter the diner's windows with the betrayal that boiled inside me. But I stayed silent, gripping the table so hard my knuckles whitened. Later that afternoon, I sat in the office of Martin Gray, a lawyer I trusted from an old contract dispute. His shelves were lined with law books, a single framed photo of his children, the only personal touch. I laid out everything: the investments, the betrayal, Daniel's evidence. Martin studied the documents carefully, his brow furrowed. When he finally looked up, his tone was matter-of-fact. This is fraud, Isabella. She solicited funds under false pretenses and used them for personal luxuries. You could sue for restitution, possibly even press charges. The word fraud landed like a gavel. A part of me thrilled at the idea of holding Cassandra accountable in a court of law. But another part, the weary, wounded daughter, hesitated. Could I really drag my own sister through the legal system? Would it destroy what little remained of our family? Martin must have seen the conflict in my eyes. His voice softened. Some people treat trust like it's endless, like it's a blank check. The only question is, how long are you willing to let it cost you? I left his office with a folder of documents heavy in my bag and an even heavier decision pressing on my chest. A week later, the knock on my front door was sharp, deliberate, the kind that doesn't wait for permission. When I opened it, my parents stood there, wrapped in their winter coats, their expressions tense. My mother clutched her handbag as though it might shield her from the words she had come to deliver. My father shifted his weight, his jaw already tight with the effort of negotiation. We need to talk, he said, his voice firm but uneasy. I stepped aside, though every instinct screamed not to. They settled stiffly onto my couch. The same couch I had bought with my own money, after years of propping up Cassandra's dream. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until my mother broke it. Your sister is in trouble, she said bluntly, her hands twisting in her lap. Her boutique is falling apart since you pulled your funding. You need to help her. The words hit me like a slap. I laughed, short, bitter. Help her? My voice shook with anger. After she lied to me, spent my money on vacations and handbags, and humiliated me in front of the family, after she dragged my name through the mud online. My father raised a hand as if calming a boardroom. She made mistakes, yes, but she's family. You can't just abandon her. The hypocrisy was suffocating. My mind flashed back to the dining room, their silence when Cassandra mocked me, their eyes fixed anywhere but on my humiliation. You didn't say a word when she called me a loser, I snapped. You sat there, silent, while she smeared me online. And now you come here to defend her? My mother's face hardened, her voice rising. You're being selfish, Isabella. You have a good job, a good life. Your sister needs you. That's what family means. Selfish. The word reverberated through me like poison. I stood, crossing my arms, my anger barely contained. I gave her $75,000. 75, and she squandered it on herself. Don't you dare call me selfish. My father sighed, rubbing his temples. Family sticks together. You could give her another chance, just enough to get back on her feet. I stared at them, a lump forming in my throat, but it wasn't weakness. It was rage. Why is it always me? I demanded. Why is it always me who has to fix things while she gets away with lies? Why do you defend her no matter what she does? The silence that followed told me everything I already knew. Because in their eyes, Cassandra was the golden child, and I was disposable. The doorbell rang, breaking the tension. I opened it to find Marissa, my closest friend, her sharp eyes immediately reading the scene. She stepped inside without waiting, her presence like an anchor. "What's going on?" she asked, her tone calm but protective. I explained in clipped words, my anger spilling out. They want me to fund Cassandra again, after everything. Marissa's jaw tightened. She turned to my parents, her voice firm. "You've got this backward. Isabella isn't the problem. Your other daughter lied, stole, and humiliated her. And you want her to keep paying for it?" My mother bristled, her voice sharp. "You don't understand family. This is between us." Marissa didn't flinch. "I understand loyalty, and Isabella deserves loyalty too. She deserves better than being treated like an ATM while you excuse Cassandra's lies." Her words cut through the room like a blade, the truth undeniable. I turned to my parents, my voice steady, but final. "I'm done, not just with Cassandra, but with all of this. If you can't respect my boundaries, we're through." My father's lips parted, as though to protest, but my mother's hand clutched his arm, silencing him. They stood, their faces a mix of frustration and disbelief, and walked out without another word. The door clicked shut, and for the first time in years I felt lighter. The weight of their expectations, their bias, their silence, it lifted with that single decision. Marissa touched my shoulder gently. "You did the right thing," she said. For the first time in years, I believed it. The collapse came faster than even I imagined. Within weeks, Cassandra's boutique, her so-called empire, crumbled like paper in the rain. The first blow came from her suppliers. My financial advisor had cut every pipeline connected to my investments, and without that lifeline, invoices piled up unpaid. Fabric shipments halted. Custom orders were cancelled. Then came the employees. 2 assistants and a store manager who quit after weeks without paychecks, their exit messages quietly spreading across Newport's small business community like wildfire. But the most devastating blow wasn't financial. It was personal. One evening, while I sipped tea in my kitchen, my phone lit up with a text from Daniel, her husband. "I can't do this anymore. I'm taking the kids and moving to my mother's in Providence. I stared at the message, my heart sinking, not for Cassandra, but for the children. 2 boys and a little girl, none of them old enough to understand that their mother's lies had hollowed out the walls of their home. I agreed to meet Daniel the next day at a coffee shop in Warwick. He looked exhausted, dark circles bruising his eyes, his shoulders sagging as if the weight of Cassandra's chaos had finally crushed him. "She's been unbearable," he admitted, his voice steady but frayed. "When the boutique started sinking, she didn't cut back. She doubled down, spent more on parties, clothes, appearances, anything to convince people she was still winning." I asked what he planned to do. He pushed a rental listing across the table, an old 2-bedroom apartment not far from his mother's house. "It's small, but safe. I can afford the monthly rent on my salary, but the deposit..." He trailed off, shame flickering across his face. Without hesitation, I closed the folder and pulled out my checkbook. "I'll cover the deposit," I said. "For the kids. Not for her." His eyes filled with something raw. Relief, gratitude, maybe even regret. "Thank you. You don't know what this means." But I did know. It meant those kids would sleep in a safe home, not in the wreckage Cassandra had built. It meant I could draw a line. Compassion for the innocent. 0 tolerance for the guilty. Meanwhile, Cassandra's downfall became impossible to ignore. Newport's local paper ran a piece. "Boutique, Darling Faces, Bankruptcy." A photo of her smiling in that velvet dress accompanied the article, but the story laid bare her unpaid debts, shuttered storefront, and lawsuits from suppliers. Her Instagram, once flooded with curated photos of luxury handbags and champagne toasts, turned eerily silent. I'd be lying if I said I felt nothing. There was a flicker of pity, but it was drowned by the memory of her laughter at the mansion, the venom in her voice when she called me a loser, the smug smirk as she dismissed $75,000 of my sacrifice as scraps. Her parents, my parents, finally felt the sting of siding with her. For years, they had shielded her from consequences, but now even they couldn't deny reality. Their golden child was exposed, and all their silence, all their excuses, had brought her nothing but ruin. One night, Marissa and I sat at a seaside cafe, the salty air cutting through the heaviness of winter. She raised her glass of wine, clinking it softly against mine. "You see? She built her castle on sand. You don't have to carry that anymore." I nodded, but my thoughts weren't on Cassandra. They were on the children, sleeping in their new apartment, free from the chaos, and on the quiet power I felt, knowing I had finally stepped out from under the shadow of a family that had never once chosen me. The phone call came late on a Tuesday night. I was curled up on the couch, a book in my lap, the hum of the heater soft in the background. When Cassandra's name lit up my screen, my first instinct was to decline. For weeks, silence had been a strange kind of medicine. No cutting remarks, no desperate texts, no manipulation dressed as affection. But curiosity, that old weakness, made me swipe to answer. Her voice rushed through the line, cracked and uneven. "Isabella? I'm sorry, okay? I messed up. I shouldn't have said those things online. But you didn't have to destroy me." The blame in her words was like acid. My jaw clenched. "Destroy you? Cassandra, you destroyed yourself. I didn't spend $75,000 on handbags and vacations. I didn't humiliate my own sister in front of our family or broadcast her name to the internet as if she were a villain." She sucked in a breath, her tone turning sharp with practiced dramatics. "You don't understand what it's like to run a boutique, to keep up appearances. Those trips, those clothes, they weren't luxuries. They were networking, survival." I almost laughed. Survival on champagne and Chanel. I remembered Daniel's hollow face at the coffee shop, the apartment listing he had shown me, The way he had whispered about protecting the kids from her chaos. That was survival. Cassandra's excuses were nothing more than a house of cards collapsing. "You're not sorry," I said finally, my voice steady. "You're scared. That's all." The silence on the line stretched, filled only by her ragged breathing. I hung up before she could reply. The next day, my parents called. My father's voice was heavy, almost pleading. "Your sister's lost everything. The boutique is gone. The house is sold. She has nothing left. We need to fix this family." I stared out the window at the bare trees swaying in the wind. Their branches clawed at the sky like accusations. "Fix it," I repeated. "Where were you when she called me a loser at your table? When she trashed me online? When she stole my money and lied to my face? You stayed silent, and now you want me to fix it." My mother's voice broke in, urgent, desperate. "She's your sister. You can't turn your back on blood. Family is family." The old guilt tugged at me, that deep-rooted belief that blood was a debt. But I thought of the documents in Martin Gray's office, the proof of fraud. I thought of Daniel's text, of the children who had to watch their mother spiral. Family wasn't blood. Family was loyalty. And loyalty was the one thing Cassandra and my parents had never given me. "I'm done," I said, my tone sharper than I intended. "I want a life free of her chaos and your silence. If you can't respect that, then I'm done with you too." The line went dead. No argument, no plea, just silence. I sat there, phone in my lap, heart pounding. For years I had chased their approval like a starving child begging for scraps. But in that moment, I realized the truth. I didn't need them anymore. The family I thought I had was gone. In its place was something stronger, myself. By spring, the air in Newport felt different. Lighter, freer, like the ocean itself was reminding me that storms, no matter how violent, always pass. For the first time in years, I woke each morning without dread pressing on my chest. No late-night calls begging for bailouts. No parents knocking at my door with guilt stitched into their voices. Just me, my quiet house, and the sound of gulls crying over the cliffs. I threw myself into work at the firm, but it no longer felt like hiding in numbers. It felt like control, like I had finally built something that belonged to me alone. Evenings became mine again. Marissa and I made a ritual of seaside dinners once a week. Clam chowder steaming against the salty air, laughter rising louder than the waves. I even dug out the old painting supplies I'd abandoned years ago. Slowly, canvases filled with colour. Each brush stroke a reminder that my life was no longer drained dry by Cassandra's endless demands. The whispers about her downfall spread quickly. People talked. Newport was small, and news travelled faster than the tide. I learned she had lost everything. The boutique shuttered, her luxury house sold, even her designer wardrobe pawned off piece by piece. A friend sent me a photo once. Cassandra hunched at the counter of a run-down diner, hair unkempt, uniform stained. She looked nothing like the velvet-draped queen who had sneered at me in front of the family. I didn't feel joy at the sight, just distance. She was a stranger now. My parents stopped calling after our last fight. Their silence was its own answer. Perhaps they couldn't forgive me for choosing boundaries over blind loyalty. Perhaps they still clung to the fantasy that Cassandra would rise again if only someone else saved her. But I no longer needed their approval. I had spent decades bending under their bias, chasing their love while they handed it freely to her. Letting go of that hunger felt like stepping into sunlight after years underground. Daniel, on the other hand, kept his word. He sent me a simple thank you note once, his handwriting uneven but sincere. "The kids are safe. They laugh again. We'll be okay." He never mentioned Cassandra, and I never asked. Our silence was an agreement, Our loyalty lay with the children, not with her. And me? I found new purpose. I began volunteering at a women's financial literacy centre, teaching budgeting and saving strategies. At first, it felt like a distraction, but as I sat with women who reminded me of myself, trusting too much, giving too much, I realised it was more than that. I wasn't there to save them. I was there to hand them the tools to save themselves. Every lesson I taught was one I had learned the hardest way possible, that kindness is not a debt and boundaries are survival. Cassandra had weaponized my generosity, twisting it into entitlement. My parents had treated my sacrifices as obligations. But here, at this small centre filled with women reclaiming their futures, I saw what true empowerment looked like. One evening, as the sun sank behind the cliffs, I stood at the edge of the ocean. The waves crashed below, relentless but free, and the salt wind tangled in my hair. For the first time, I felt the same freedom in myself. I had chosen my life, not the one my parents forced on me, not the one Cassandra tried to drain from me, but mine. Her story was no longer mine to carry.